Greetings and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching the lesson Install, Configure, and Manage the Mailbox Role. This is a primary section of the 70-341 Core Solutions exam, and our focus in this lesson is Monitor and Troubleshoot the Mailbox Role. Under the section Monitor and Troubleshoot the Mailbox Role, this objective may include, but is not limited to, troubleshoot database replication and replay, troubleshoot database copy activation, troubleshoot mailbox role performance, troubleshoot database failures, and monitor database replication and content indexing. Okay, so let's get started. The company that we're working with is actually a familiar one. It's called eHelp. It's a support company that uses email and text messages to assist end users. We worked with them in the previous lesson as well. Now the reason they're back is that now they have a new problem. Now that we've assisted them in implementing a DAG for their environment, they're concerned about monitoring and troubleshooting. Our goal is going to be to suggest a monitoring solution to aid them in acting quickly should a problem arise, and help them to formulate a troubleshooting plan. Let's talk for a moment about monitoring tools that are built into Exchange 2013. To be honest, they're very limited. This is a wide door that's open to third-party solutions to assist in monitoring Exchange 2013. Now behind the scenes, PowerShell commandlets are used. This is to help test and monitor Exchange, and both Microsoft and third-party vendors use those commandlets and the parameters to create easy-to-use monitoring solutions. So on the one hand, we could become masters of commandlets and work with PowerShell through the Exchange Management Shell in order to retrieve information to monitor and troubleshoot our Exchange environment. Or we can go with another solution that kind of does this for us. In all honesty, the expense is worth going with another solution. Now Microsoft offers System Center Operations Manager, which has snap-in management packs. And so from an exam perspective, if Microsoft is looking for information on how you would monitor your Exchange environment using an external tool, some alternative tool rather than the built-in tools that are in Exchange 2013, well, in those cases, the answers are going to relate back to System Center. Not that there aren't third-party tools that are great. Personally, when it comes to monitoring, I like eNow's Mailscape. There are several other tools from GSX and others that are really great and worth looking into. But when it comes to the Microsoft certification exam, obviously they want you to use their tools, and so from a monitoring perspective, System Center Operations Manager is your tool. Although other third-party solutions also exist. As far as the art of troubleshooting, troubleshooting typically comes in two forms. You're either troubleshooting a new configuration that isn't working, or you're troubleshooting a working configuration that suddenly stops working. Now obviously the way you handle each of these situations is going to be different. When you're troubleshooting a new configuration that isn't working, you have to assume that the configuration is part of the problem. At that point you might look at forums, you might start trying to figure out why it's not working, who else has had similar problems of this sort. You might check the logs to see how far you've gotten in the process. So depending on whether it's an installation or a configuration issue, you would follow one path. But when something is working, perhaps even working for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden it stops working, well, that's a different issue. And the path you might take when troubleshooting might also be different. To troubleshoot properly, you need to gather information revolving around the issue. So you want to look at the logs. Now remember, there's diagnostic logging that you can actually enable and turn up, make more verbose, and there are event logs. So you have these two different areas that you can look to. Event logs will tell you information not just about Exchange, but also about the server operating system and other dependencies as well. You also want visual proof of the problem. You need to know exactly what's happening here. So if mail's not flowing, you can use the Q viewer. If it's a transport issue, that's one thing. If it is your mailbox databases, some kind of corruption, some type of issue that's caused them to crash in some way, or services that are down, all of this is part of discovering visual proof of the problem. You also need to make sure your disks have free space available. You want to check not just services, but also service dependencies. So really, these are the things you want to check first, and that's because it's easy to check these things. You want to try the easiest approach first, and work your way from the most probable cause to the more difficult, least probable cause. Now, we're going to stick in this lesson to general tools and ideas. But the honest truth is when you're having trouble with your mailbox databases or DAG replication and replay, or any of the other items on the list in terms of the objectives for the 70-341 exam, the real truth is in a real-world production environment, you run to the forums. That's where you'll find real-world answers from the experts. But it's good to have a starting point. It's good to know that you've tried a few things first and that you've gathered some information, because sometimes even in the forums, you'll be asked to provide certain information back with regard to the errors that you're seeing. So it's good to know the tools that you have at your disposal, but ultimately it's really nice to be able to run to the forums and to be able to get input from Exchange masters, Exchange MVPs, people on the Exchange product team, the development team. So the forums is really essential. Obviously that's not going to help you on a certification exam when it comes to answering questions. So it's good to have at least a base of information in terms of where you might go if you see certain problems coming your way. So for example, with database and replication failures, you want to review event logs. Now System Center 2012 can really assist when it comes to monitoring and troubleshooting, because one of the things it does is it pulls the logs and it can provide feedback based upon what it's seeing through the event logs. If it's a problem with your storage, you might want to use the storage system's diagnostic tools to confirm that the storage system is functioning properly. Obviously, different types of storage systems have different tools, but you should be familiar with the tools that you have for your system. If you're having problems when it comes to replication within a DAG, you might also check the Exchange Replication Service health and check for service dependencies as well. Now, note, just because the focus here is mailbox troubleshooting doesn't mean you won't have to utilize transport and network troubleshooting skills in the real world. So sometimes when you're facing a problem, it could be a multi-level problem. It could be something that's specific to the mailbox database or to your DAG, or it could be something within the network itself. So you have to be flexible when it comes to troubleshooting. I know we're focused right now on the mailbox side and databases and so forth, but in the real world, you have to be able to troubleshoot a wide array of different problems that may come up. And there are other lessons in this series to help you when it comes to various problems, whether it's with transport or with your client access servers and so forth. When it comes to troubleshooting replication, there are commandlets that you can run from the Exchange Management Shell, like the test-replication health commandlet. There's the get-mailbox database copy status. This is helpful because it helps you to see if your mailbox database is being copied properly, so it can report back on the status of your DAG replication. There's a script called the collectovermetrics.ps1 script. This collects data from performance counters, and it will generate a report on the different statistical data that it pulls in. There's also the new mailbox repair request if it's a problem with a specific mailbox. So these different types of commandlets can really come in handy. Now let's jump over to our Exchange environment and let's take a look at how these work. Alright, so we're on our Exchange server, Windows Server 2012. We're on the client access server role, and that's okay because we can use PowerShell from any of these servers in through the Exchange Management Shell. So the first thing here is that there are a variety of different test commandlets that you can work with to troubleshoot your Exchange. One of the nice things about these different commandlets is that it's these commandlets combined with a variety of others that help monitoring solutions to actually work. So when a monitoring solution says it can perform a task and you're working in a GUI, oftentimes behind the scenes what's really happening is a PowerShell command is being run, but you don't have to be the one to run it. And so when it's testing pieces of your environment and it's showing you hopefully a big green light saying everything's working fine, behind the scenes it's usually PowerShell. But if you did want to see the different test commandlets that are available, you can use the get-command, type in test, and then put in an asterisk, and that returns back to you all of the different commands or commandlets that you can use. You can see the module name over here. And so you could see things that might be helpful, whether it's MapBFlow, MapBConnectivity. And as we look down, you see connection, you see cluster resource failure certificate. So there's a lot of different commandlets that you can run. The one we want to take a look at the moment is the test replication health. Now before we run it, it's good for you to note that we did make some adjustments to our environment. We broke something here. You can see if we go to our Exchange Admin Center and we take a look at the database here, this database is supposed to have a copy over on mailbox 2. You can see that it failed and is suspended. So it's in a state of suspension, and this will allow us to actually see some feedback when we run these commandlets. So if we test the replication health, we hit enter. And here we can see what has passed and what has failed. So the database redundancy check, the database availability check, the DB copy suspended, all of these things failed. The rest is working out okay. So you can see how a commandlet like that returns some good information, some very helpful information. In addition, the other commandlet that we mentioned, the get-mailbox database copy status, let's check that one out. Here we can see MB2 here we can see that mailbox 2 here is mounted. Everything looks fine for the actual database there, but then the second one has failed and is suspended, and you can see some information there. So the first one is healthy, the second one is suspended. Now we could have gotten this information just by looking at the Exchange Admin Center as well, but by using the commandlets you can get a little bit more information depending on the parameters you put in, a little more detailed information. Now one of the other commandlets we mentioned is the new -mailbox repair request, and what's nice about this commandlet is you can run it against a specific mailbox or you can run it against an entire database. So if it's against a mailbox, when you run it, then access to that mailbox is actually disrupted for the time being while the mailbox is being repaired. If you're running it against a database, only the mailbox being repaired is disrupted. So the database can continue to be operational. But still, it's nice to know that we have these types of commandlets at our disposal to assist us when we're having a problem. So we've only mentioned a handful of different commandlets, whether it's a test commandlet or a commandlet to assist with our databases or with our replication copies and so forth. If we need more information about these commandlets, we can actually research all of the commandlets through the Exchange TechNet site. There's a link at the end of this lesson in additional research resources, and so you can utilize that link to connect you back to TechNet so you can research any of the different commandlets that may help you in troubleshooting a problem. Let's jump back over to our slides and let's talk a little bit about performance. From a performance perspective, a good monitoring solution can report back on performance metrics as well. Exchange 2013 includes built-in health monitors that monitor the health of system resources. Within Performance Monitor, you can utilize counters that make sense for Exchange. You can create data collector sets that really help when it comes to narrowing down your focus in terms of a baseline, as well as keeping up to date with how your performance is going from that point forward. So at this point, let's jump back over to our Exchange environment and let's take a look at the Performance Monitor and see what we can do there. We'll set up a few data collector sets that can be useful within an organization, and so connecting back to our scenario with eHelp, we'll set up a couple of data collector sets for them so that they have something to start with. We'll also take a look at the existing data collector sets that were created for us when we installed Exchange. And then another thing we're going to take a quick look at is the health mailboxes that are created by Exchange 2013 automatically. Now, this is something that we don't typically see because they're hidden mailbox objects, and we have to use the Exchange Management Shell using the get-mailbox-monitoring command in order to see these mailboxes. But these health mailboxes actually are used by Exchange to verify mail flow every 5 minutes. Now, on the one hand, that's a good thing. On the other hand, it causes problems if you're doing organization-wide journaling, at least in the RTM version of Exchange 2013. So at the end of this lesson, there's an article that's referenced in the additional resources with regard to these health mailboxes and how you can work with them so that they don't interfere with your journaling. Alright, so let's jump over to our Exchange server. Let's take a look at the Performance Monitor and also take a look at these health mailboxes using the get-mailbox-monitoring command. Alright, so we're back on our Exchange server here, And the first thing we want to do is take a look at Performance Monitor. Alright, and so here we have Performance Monitor, and you know that you have objects and counters that you can actually take a look at here through the real-time Performance Monitor, but oftentimes just staring at a screen with real-time performance indications doesn't really do much for you. And so we have these data collector sets. So if we expand this out, it's good to note that when you installed Exchange, a couple of user-defined data collector sets were actually configured. Exchange Diagnostics Daily Performance Log and Exchange Diagnostics Performance Log. If we open this up, we can see the various performance counters that are being looked at. It's actually quite a bit. And you'll note that these are actually running. So if they're running, we should be able to see reports. We go down to reports, we see user defined, and here you can see we have the Diagnostics Daily Performance Log and the Exchange Diagnostics Performance Log. You can see that this one's been running for 300 seconds. The other one's been running for quite a bit longer. So if we wanted to, we could stop these logs. Let's stop the Diagnostics Performance Log. It's been running for a little bit. We'll stop it. And we'll take a look at the report. Well, that's certainly going to be helpful. I mean, just look right there. Doesn't that tell you everything in a nutshell that you really wanted to know? So what exactly are these data collector sets for? Well, some of you may be aware that there's a new self-monitoring in Exchange 2013, which is termed Managed Availability. Now, the whole purpose of Managed Availability is to detect and correct issues before they're reported. So what Managed Availability does, it's comprised of probes, monitors, and responders. And the purpose of the probes is to collect data. So this is accomplished by a variety of different methods. As you can see here, we have the ability to collect data through the data collector sets. And so that's one way. So there are these probes here that sample performance monitor data. And so there's these two data collector sets for the purpose of automatically gathering and analyzing that data. All of this activity, by the way, is overseen by the Microsoft Exchange Health Management Service. But if you look here and you see the graphic, you can see that this is really not for us. We can't really make heads or tails out of this kind of information. So for us, if we wanted to use Performance Monitor, what types of objects and counters might we include? Well, typically we include things like the processor, the memory, some Active Directory information we might want to include, information store information. So there's a lot that we can reach out to. But in all honesty, you don't want to make it too cluttered, because then you put yourself in a position where you can't really read the data that's coming back your way. So for us to have what we need, we're going to need to define our own data collector sets. So to do that, under User Defined, if we click New Data Collector Set, we can give it a name. We'll call it Exchange Monitor. We can create from a template, or we can create one manually. We'll do the manual one for now. As far as data logs, performance counter, event trace data, system configuration information, we can establish performance counter alert. We'll click Next. Leave it at the root directory. And we'll leave all of this. For now, we're just trying to create the data collector set. What we're going to do is we're going to now create data collectors for this data collector set. One of them will be a base data collector set. We click Next. And we can add in the performance counters. So some of the counters we may want to look at include things like the processor. So under the processor, we can see a variety of different options here. Perhaps percent processor time, percent user time, percent privilege time. We click Add. They get added over under Processor. We can scroll down. We can find additional information that we may want to include. For example, if we go to the Microsoft Exchange information, there's a whole mess of different collectors that we can look at. Even ones that deal with Active Directory access. Perhaps if we look at AD access domain controllers, perhaps we want to look at things like the LDAP read time, LDAP search time, searches time limit exceeded per minute. We can add those over as well. Perhaps memory is another important one we want to make sure we have in our data collector set. Available megabytes, page reads per second, page input per second, pool paged bytes. These are all different ones that you can choose. Obviously, there's a lot in terms of what these do. You can show the descriptions to learn more. And we click Finish. So now we have this data collector set. We can go to the properties of it and work with it. Here we have the Exchange Monitor data collector set there. We can add additional data collectors in here for looking at perhaps the disk or the Microsoft Exchange Information Store. So there's a lot more we can do with this, and then ultimately we can start it. We'll wait a few minutes. Now, while we're waiting, in case you're wondering in your mind, is this how I typically monitor Exchange? Absolutely not. I don't use Performance Monitor ever. Obviously, it's something that we can use, it's there, but personally, I always go with third-party monitoring solutions. I find them to be easier when it comes to Exchange. I like big green or red lights. That's one of the reasons I like eNow's Mailscape, because everything is very big. They use PowerShell commands to get me information about my Exchange. As far as performance itself, obviously we need to know performance information. We need to be able to test it. But again, Performance Monitor is just not my go-to tool. But it is built right into Server, and it can be useful in this case, so we're demonstrating it. And the fact is that you may get questions on the 70-341 exam that relate around Microsoft's built-in tools. Performance Monitor is one of them, Task Manager is another, so it's good for you to be aware that these tools are here and how they might work as far as data collector sets. Alright, let's stop the collector from running. And we can see all this good information that's come our way. Very helpful. Now the last thing I wanted to show you before we jump back over to the slides is that monitoring commandlet for mailboxes, for those health mailboxes. So if we type get mailbox -monitoring, here you can see the different health mailboxes that are invisible. You can't see them, but you can see that they exist on the mailbox server MB1 and MB2. You can see what they're called, and based upon this information you can actually make some adjustments in terms of being able to have your journal rules work. And so this is something that happens in the background, but it can affect your journaling. Alright, let's jump back over to our slides and let's talk about an old tool that still exists, still works, and has always been a last resort go-to tool for Exchange administrators. One tool that we don't want to forget ever when it comes to talking about Exchange is the escutil.exe. This is an old tool. It's one that many Exchange administrators have had to rely on when things are really, really bad. It's the truth. We've all had to deal with it at some point where our database is corrupt, and this escutil tool is perfect. It's also necessary for when you're doing recovery of Exchange. You have to run the escutil in order to work with your Exchange databases after they've been recovered. Now, in fact, I just had to use it with Exchange 2013 after playing around with JetStress. If you watch the lesson on JetStress, because I'm working with a virtual server and I didn't have enough memory and so forth, running JetStress actually corrupted my database in some way. The good news is it's not a production database, but I did want to restore it rather than just give up and create a new database and move forward. That would have been cheating. And so the escutil tool was really helpful. Now, there's an article in the additional research resources at the end of the lesson entitled Repairing Exchange Databases with escutil. It's a great article. It's a little bit old, but it's still very relevant when it comes to when and how you use the escutility. So I recommend that you take a look at that. On the plus side, DAGs automatically defragment the data, and that data is sequentially stored to disk. And so that eliminates the need, for the most part, to run that escutil. We used to have to run it a lot, but now it's a rare occasion when you have to run the tool to correct database corruption. But still, it's essential to know that it exists. One of the points that is brought up in the objectives revolves around the content catalog index issues that may come up. If the content index catalog for a mailbox database copy gets corrupted, you may need to reseed the catalog. Now, just to review, seeding is the process in which a copy of a mailbox database is added to another mailbox server. So when we first say, okay, we have two member servers that are part of a DAG, which is something we worked on in a previous lesson, and we say that the database from Mailbox 1 is going to have a passive copy on Mailbox 2. The first part of the process is seeding, and that's where the database on Mailbox 1 is copied over to Mailbox 2. So that is what seeding is all about. Now, this becomes the database copy into which copied log files and data are replayed. But sometimes the content index becomes corrupted, and so you may see a corrupted content index application error in the event log. That event ID would be something like 123, Exchange Store database would be the focus. So if you see this type of an issue, or even if you just feel that there's a problem with your content index catalog, the way you resolve this is you use the update-mailbox database copy commandlet to reseed the catalog. Now that commandlet can be used for a variety of different things, but when you're using it in this case, you're going to use it with the -catalog only parameter at the end. So what this does is, in this example, we see the content index catalog for the copy of the database, database 1, on the mailbox server, MB1, and what this does is it just handles the catalog only without seeding the database file itself. However, again, if you research the update-mailbox database copy commandlet, you'll see that you can use this for a variety of other problems and issues with your DAG copies. So to find out more information about this commandlet, or really any of the ones that we've mentioned so far, there's a link at the end of the lesson, and you can use that to do research on any of the commandlets for Exchange 2013. Going back to our scenario, as far as what we would recommend for eHelp, being that eHelp is using all Microsoft solutions, Hyper-V, SharePoint, and so forth, we're going to recommend that they go with System Center Operations Manager 2012 with management packs for all of their solutions. Now, as an Exchange administrator, you may or may not be a System Center expert just yet, but I would recommend that you take some time to work with System Center tools, especially Operations Manager, being that there is a connection between Operations Manager and Exchange. And there are other connections between System Center tools and Exchange. For example, there's System Center Data Protection Manager, which is important if you want continuous data protection for your Exchange environment. So within these lessons, we're not going to take the time to demonstrate the System Center tools. That's a whole entire series in and of itself. So in these lessons, we're staying focused on the 70-341 exam. We're not going to take the time to jump over and demonstrate System Center tools, and that's okay. Just know that these tools do exist, and from a Microsoft perspective, especially on the exam, they're going to want to see that you know that they exist and know where they fit into Exchange 2013, in this case monitoring. With eHelp, we've configured performance monitoring for baseline as well as follow-up checks, and we've confirmed with their support team what to do to troubleshoot issues that may arise based on a logical progression of most probable and easiest to fix. Some of the additional research points to keep in mind: we want you to take a look at these 4 articles. The first one is Exchange 2013 Health Check Monitors and Journaling. That goes back to the point that was made earlier in the lesson regarding these health mailboxes and how they can interfere with journaling. So this article will help you to see what you might do to mitigate that. The next one is Repairing Exchange Databases with ESCUtil, When and How. Then we have Tools that are used with Exchange. This is a list of tools. Some of them are out of date, but it's just good to see a full list of all the different tools that you might use. And the last one is Exchange 2013 Commandlets. So we hope you found this informative. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.